Hello everyone. Welcome to my YNR 24 Spoilers channel. Claire ends her relationship with Kyle. Billy persisted, Jack contacted Jill, and Claire re-examined Holden's offer on The Young and the Restless Monday, September 29th episode. On The Young and the Restless, Jack and Billy, Kyle invited Claire inside the Abbott estate when she arrived. She expressed surprise that he had recommended that they eat breakfast there, but she thought it would be an excellent place to chat. He acknowledged that it was a contributing factor in his decision to alter the venue. Harrison greeted her in Italian as he rushed in and gave her a hug. Harrison grumbled that returning to school sounded dull. Kyle suggested that the boys' first day back might include cupcakes, and Claire expected his buddies to be delighted to see him. Harrison's disposition improved, and Kyle told his son to inform Mrs. Martinez that he was prepared to leave. Harrison pleaded with Claire and Kyle to drive him to school. Claire said that it was a fantastic idea when Kyle asked whether she was okay with it. Harrison gave a cheer and drew them into a clumsy group hug. Kyle and Claire dropped Harrison off at school and came back to the mansion. Kyle was happy to see his tiny friend again and observed that the home had been quiet without him. Kyle expressed gratitude to Claire for granting Harrison's request to take him. Kyle mentioned that Harrison wasn't the only one, and Claire expressed her gratitude that the boy had wanted her there. Kyle and Claire struck up a conversation over breakfast in the dining room about their careers and how Kane's return had upset both of their families. It felt like forever since they'd just been normal together, Kyle said, adding that it was good to just hang around like they used to. Claire gave a lecture, saying that they couldn't act as though their relationship was normal when it wasn't, and she believed it was time for them to discuss it. Although Kyle understood that he and Claire couldn't just return to their previous situation, he wasn't sure what else he could do to undo the harm he had caused. Claire wasn't certain that anything he had done was the cause of her perplexity. She clarified that although she was aware of the authority she had granted to all the people in her life to advise her on their relationship, she was feeling more about herself than about him or them together. Claire mentioned how she had jumped into a relationship with Kyle too quickly and that, due to her inexperience, she had not been able to handle things when they went bumpy. She acknowledged that instead of following her own intuition, she had sought advice from others. Claire felt that she had to go out into the world and make her own decisions and mistakes without seeking approval from others. It sounded to Kyle like she was ending their relationship. Claire maintained that it was best for her at the time and might be best for her and Kyle in the future. Kyle argued that because they were in love, he had anticipated that they would eventually move in together and be married. In a gentle tone, Claire expressed her continued affection for him without implying that it would last forever. She pleaded with him not to argue with her and to allow her to be alone for a bit. As she left, Kyle shuddered. Claire gathered herself later and called Holden at the park. She inquired as to if his offer to show her LA remained unlocked. Victor told Nick, and Victoria at the new Newman Ranch that they needed to talk about something that couldn't wait until Adam and Chelsea returned from handling the business at Newman Media. Nick noted that they didn't know if Kane had been engaged in Colin's previous swindle, but Victor disclosed that Kane hadn't taken his threat to expose it seriously. Victor yelled that everyone would know Kane was involved by the time Newman Media was finished. Victor was going to wait and see what Kane would do next. Victor was positive that Kane was not yet prepared for Armageddon, despite Nick's concerns that he might try to take over Genoa City's companies by planting the AI. Jack had been there the previous evening to offer the last-ditch suggestion that they cooperate in order to beat Kane, Victor revealed. Victor went on to say that he and Jack believed Jill had a greater impact on Kane than Lily did. Victor went on to say that Kane thought highly of Jill and that he didn't want her to believe he wasn't the son she had always desired. Victor thought that Jill would persuade Kane to stay away from the evil side and that they would crush him once he became vulnerable. Following Victoria and Nick's departure, Nikki was concerned that Victor may turn the favor that Jack had offered him against him. Why care? Victor questioned sourly. Victor and Jack's partnership would fail, according to Victoria, and Nick at Society. Victoria expressed her doubts that Jill would cooperate with them to defeat Kane, and she lamented that Billy had been badly affected by Jill's apparent preference for Kane. Nick thought that everything would fall apart if Billy found out what Victor and Jack were up to. Kane didn't have Lily, but Nick thought he was a greedy bastard who was used to having everything and wanted more. Kane had no personal life, so Nick thought he may try to take over the world. Nick told Victoria not to feel sorry for Kane, even if she thought it was tragic. Nick went on to say that he had to know Victoria wasn't going soft because he had to leave town. Victoria demanded to know who he was going with and where. Nick revealed that his son needed advice and that Noah might have a sponsor for a new club in LA. Although he didn't want Victoria's opinion, Nick admitted that he was going on the trip with Sharon. Victoria admitted that it would likely be best for him to escape while the mess was going on. She also intended to put herself out of the situation and let Victor and Jack work things out. Chancellor Park is where Sally and Audra first met. Before they left for a run, Audra wanted to offer some possible employment prospects that she had pieced together. Since Abbott Communications might be getting back on track, Sally reported that there had been a little change in plans. Sally summarized her talk with Billy the previous evening and asserted that they had made progress. After that, Audra doubted Sally had gone straight home to bed to consider it. Sally revealed that Billy had decided to stay with her after she had given him the choice to either stop pursuing Chancellor or leave her. A doubtful Audra asked why Sally was exerting so much effort to persuade her, or to persuade herself. Sally was reminded by Audra of their goal to forge their own path without a guy dictating their destiny. Sally reasoned that Abbott Communications was already developed and prepared for launch. Sally claimed that Audra would continue to be an important member and that she would continue to serve as CEO, with Billy in second place. The idea of having to report to Billy made Audra sulk. Sally offered to include a clause in Audra's contract stating that she would be working under her direct supervision. As soon as their funds was restored, Sally planned to immediately ramp things up. Audra was shocked to learn that the business was broke. Billy was meeting with Jack to put things back on track, Sally argued. Audra complained that they were once again at the whim of two men who were deciding what would happen to her and Sally, and she assumed that Jack would tell Billy to ignore it. Jack noticed that Jill looked good and started a video call with her at Abbotts. Jack rarely reached out elsewhere, so Jill figured someone was in trouble. Whatever was collapsing, she assumed had to do with Billy. Billy thought Mom had granted Kane a free pass while punishing Billy for all of his past transgressions. Jack clarified. Jill pondered whether Jack shared Billy's sentiments. Jack told her that Kane was behind it all and that the stakes had just increased. Jack insisted that Jill and Billy should handle the situation. Jill didn't understand why everyone saw Kane as a threat, but she detested the obstacles that stood between her and Billy. Jack pleaded with her to take a plane and see for herself, as it might alter her opinion of the surrogate kid she preferred to her own. Billy asked Jack if he had a moment to talk with his family as he knocked on the door. Jack immediately logged out after telling Jill he will get in touch. Jack thought bitterly about which Billy had entered the room. Billy restated that he had realized he needed to change after working things out with Sally and seeing the light with Kane. Billy vowed to concentrate on Abbott Communications and to persuade Jack to once more be the only investor. Jack hesitated. Billy felt bad for pressuring Jack to stop providing funding. Billy assured Jack that it would be the final time they went down that road, despite Jack's complaints that they had done it too often. Jack cautioned that Billy had pushed him too far that time, but he wanted to think Billy was done with Kane and Chancellor. Billy questioned whether Jack was rejecting him incredulously. Billy's remarks had lost all meaning, and Jack wished he had more options. Billy protested that the funds had already been set aside, but he pleaded that Sally had given up an incredible career to work for the company. Jack thought Billy would eventually decide to take over once more, and since there was too much at risk at Abbotts, Jack might need the money. Jack was adamant that he was unable to assist Billy. Jack genuinely wished them success, and Billy vowed that he and Sally would not allow it to die. Billy strode off. Billy bumped into Audra and Sally on the patio of Crimson Lights. Sally assumed Jack wasn't backing their business, based on his look. Billy acknowledged that Jack had misgivings, but he promised that it wouldn't end there. Jack, in the meantime, showed up to the Newman Ranch and inquired as to whether he and Victor had made an agreement to work together against Kane. The Young and the Restless Monday, September 29th episode featured the kind of quiet destruction that soap opera viewers are all too familiar with. Seemingly routine moments that, upon closer inspection, revealed deep cracks, irrevocable decisions, and the kind of emotional clarity that only comes from heartbreak. The focal point of this storm was Claire Grace Newman, who came to the Abbott estate to have breakfast with Kyle Abbott. It was a seemingly harmless scene, but it quickly turned into the scene of one of the most important discussions in her early life. Claire was taken aback when Kyle requested her to meet at the Abbott residence, rather than society, where they frequently hang out in public. She soon discovered that he had planned the shift because it provided closeness and seclusion, an opportunity to escape Genoa City's prying eyes. There was a small moment of purity and happiness before the actual conversation started, though, as Kyle's kid Harrison ran into the room and put his tiny arms around Claire with unadulterated love. His use of Italian as he greeted her represented both his developing appeal and the weird hybrid world Claire had found herself in, where she was firmly ingrained in Kyle's family's everyday routines, yet neither stepmother nor girlfriend. Claire was able to persuade Harrison that his buddies would be overjoyed to see him again after he complained that school sounded boring. Ever the loving parent, Kyle offered cupcakes as a way to help the youngster adjust. Together, they created the appearance of a stable family, even if that facade was about to fall apart. The presence of the young boy made Claire's predicament more pressing. She readily agreed when Harrison pleaded with Kyle and Claire to take him to school. Harrison's ecstatic ovation and the spontaneous group hug that ensued demonstrated how much she meant to him. Kyle saw it as proof of the life he wanted to create with her, a blended family, love healed from previous hurts, and an opportunity at happiness free from betrayal. However, it strengthened Claire's belief that she had been hurled into obligations and responsibilities for which she was unprepared. It was almost abnormally silent in the mansion after Harrison was dropped off. Kyle acknowledged this, expressing his happiness at having his son back at home and the significance of Claire's participation in that morning routine. She absorbed his thankfulness with a sort of bittersweet melancholy, but he didn't detect the uncertainty in her grin. He interpreted it as a sign that their relationship was once again stable. As a matter of fact, Claire had already decided. Most couples would be envious of the banal conversation that started the brunch that followed. Employment, Kane Ashby's tumultuous return, and the repercussions that shook the Abbott and Newman families. They acted as though everything was easy for a while. Claire was unable to keep up the illusion, though. They couldn't pretend to be normal when the reality was anything but, she said firmly, cutting off the joking. She asserted that it was time to confront their relationship directly. Conflict was nothing new to Kyle. He had survived corporate conflicts, betrayals, and the residual effects of his parents' complex legacy. However, this was not like the others. He leaned in vulnerable and confessed that he was frantic to find out what more he could do to undo the harm, even though he knew they couldn't simply revert to their previous habits. He didn't get the assurance he was hoping for from Claire's reaction. She clarified in a calm manner that this wasn't totally related to anything Kyle had done wrong. She was the focus. She acknowledged that she had jumped into a romantic relationship with him too soon, hardly giving herself time to figure out what she wanted or who she was outside of the complicated family dynamics of Genoa City and the Newman name. She had disregarded her own intuition and relied on the counsel of others when times were difficult. She was lost because of that dependence. Now, she needed the freedom to make her own decisions, even if it meant leaving, rather than another assurance from him. The word struck Kyle like a blow. He attempted to reinterpret it by claiming that it sounded like a breakup. Claire acknowledged it with a hint of melancholy. For now, maybe, but not forever. Yes, she loved him. But if she couldn't support herself, love wasn't enough. She had to put her independence to the test, make errors without a safety net, and discover Claire's true self without depending on him or anyone else. Kyle protested right away and with much emotion. In his ideal future, they would live together, establish a secure house, and get married. He thought that commitment meant overcoming the confusion rather than running away from it, and that their love could withstand ambiguity. But Claire didn't waver. She reiterated that this was about self-discovery rather than a lack of affection. She pleaded with him not to fight her on it, because doing so would prevent her from growing. As she walked away, Kyle was left reeling, astonished by the severity of her decision. There were no dramatic allegations, betrayals, or a fiery breakup. The peaceful death that resulted from someone recognizing they had to give up comfort in order to discover who they were was terrible. Additionally, the loss was more profound for Kyle than words could convey, because he had imagined her as a constant presence in both his and Harrison's lives. Claire made up her mind later in the park. She called Holden, the man who had been nagging at her, to show her a world outside of Genoa City. She asked, her voice trembling only a little, if the invitation to L.A. remained unlocked. For her, it was the start of a new chapter, one that Kyle was not involved in. Life elsewhere in Genoa City, meanwhile, rushed forth with equal vigor. Concerns regarding Kane's goals and Jack's unexpected willingness to work together were raised when Victor told Nick, and Victoria about his most recent schemes at the Newman Ranch. Victoria and Nick expressed skepticism regarding Billy's brittle self-esteem and Jill's dedication at society. Sally bet her future on a guy Audra mistrusted at Chancellor Park as they argued over independence versus the allure of Billy's promises. Additionally, Jack struggled with Billy's cycle of failure and reinvention at Abbotts once more, finally declining to contribute to his brother's most recent endeavor. However, no plotline was as emotionally charged as the silent breakdown of Kyle and Claire's relationship, because this was sadness at its most personal, not business fights and vendettas. It had nothing to do with heritage, wealth, or power. It was about a man discovering that love, no matter how strong, isn't always enough to hold someone who needs to leave, and a young woman recognizing she couldn't take a shortcut to selfhood. Will Kyle respect her need for privacy, or will he struggle to get her back? Will Claire's trip to Los Angeles with Holden be a journey of self-determination, or a different path that returns her to Genoa City with more wisdom, but with scars? Above all, how will Harrison respond if the woman he so naively accepted as a member of his family vanishes from his life? These questions, the delicate balance between pain and hope, endings that are actually beginnings in disguise, are what soap operas are all about. The fact that Claire and Kyle's split was based on timing rather than treachery is what makes it so tragic. Simply said, the needs of two people who are in love with one another are not the same. The time is right for Kyle. The date is later for Claire, after she has found her identity, and no one else is shaping her narrative. That is not a complete or final conclusion. However, this interruption will permanently alter them both. Watch The Young and the Restless in its entirety on CBS or stream it on Paramount+.